We're gonna lose that section of grass anyway, so you hate it.
Yeah, that was the time of year.
Well, I guess that I don't know. I wouldn't think they'd take away the mailbox and have the mailman walk our street. They could do one of those little community boxes. They could
Yes.
like a year ago, probably about this.
Is that Mark back there?
Yeah.
Hello, Mark. This is part of it. Oh. Oh, he thought they're dancing. He's shaky. That's funny.
With us?
It doesn't count.
Yeah, it
Public
matter.
hearing.
Yeah, it's like, they publish a notice, so we can actually hang out together now.
Be careful of that top of that. That came off.
You fix it, so
It's just fine.
it's better than when you started?
Yeah.
Good news from Johnny.
How are you doing?
Oh,
Seats?
and what was this?
Karen's niece.
Karen, oh, really? Oh.
That's within the last 5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Right off the press.
Wow.
Appreciate Johnny. Pretty exciting.
Yes, it is.
Because this morning, so I'm guessing she was busy, but during school day, I was doing announcements and things. Yeah, well, because she hurt, she had them on Tuesday, and then Wednesday
Oh,
was
that's
actually,
nice.
we went out to sweet. Is there any chance you're gonna have your baby like, and this was, like, maybe it becomes really quick, but it's fun.
He's a good guy, you can share.
Well, good evening, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's a little after 5:30. My name is Brent Berkland. I'm the city engineer for North Platte, and thank you, everybody, for coming. We have a sign-in sheet in the back, and then also a handout. There's the 3 pages that we have here. They're on smaller, which is a little harder to read, but feel free to get a copy. And then that's also what we have on the screen, so it should be the same three things for you to look at. This evening, the purpose of the 1 and 6 road hearing is, there's several purposes. One, the state requires that as part of the funding. The other part is we want to communicate the plan of the city of what we're looking at for the 1 year, and 6, the terminology is 1, which is what's being looked at in this next construction season. And then the 6 just means longer term, after the 1 year. Between 2 and 6, it's just a longer term definition for that. And so I appreciate everybody coming, and what I'm gonna do is go through and present our plan that we're looking at, and then at the end, we'll open it up for questions or comments, things like that. So if you have questions as we're going along, if you have a pen or paper, try to make a mental note, and then when we get to the end, we'll go through questions and things like that as we go. So I'll start out with, this is the 1 year plan. If you have this, it has the green and the red, and what it shows is the projects that were completed and also the projects that are proposed. And there's a balance between maintenance and projects. A lot of issues with streets are maintenance, and if you, on the second sheet, we have what we call the maintenance plan. We're looking at some resurfacing issues. But this is the projects that we have listed on the 1 year. 9th Street, I'll just start at the top and work our way down. At the top, we have 9th Street, the design for that, and that's finishing from the west end of town. There's a curb and gutter section where it switches to more of a rural section up to Buffalo. Dewey and Jeffers is, again, design only. That's participation with the state of Nebraska. Then end of next year, they're going to be bidding that project for rebuilding Jeffers, and they're also working on the design for Dewey as well. And also we have Lakeview that's going to be starting April, approximately April, that's going to be changed from a asphalt section, a rural section, to a 3-lane concrete section. And these ones that are shown in green here, those are ones that are completed, and the West Brentwood is a private developer, did the cul-de-sac. This green one's William, again, that was another private developer, that's on the north side of the hospital. We showed the Centennial bike trail, the city forces, and worked on getting that done late last fall. Reed was reconstructed last year with asphalt. They put in a new water main and then resurfaced the asphalt, milled and replaced it. And then also on this year's 1 year plan, again, this is a private project. Mid-Plains Community College is going to put in Sunrise from Highway 83 to Willow. So this is a summary of the 1 year plan and picture. We have a few other things listed, like crack sealant, armor coating. We have a paving districts with asphalt, which we're calling that the maintenance part. That'll be on the next sheet that we'll kind of go through and look at that. And again, these were the items that were completed in green. Okay, this next piece is the maintenance plan, and this is predominantly asphalt and seal coat work. And as you can see, there's quite a few different street areas in town. And we let a asphalt project last fall, and Western Engineering is the contractor. The areas that are shown in red, those are the asphalt streets that are going to get milled, overlaid, and repair work done. And I'll just kind of go from the top to bottom. But it's Front Street from Buffalo to Willow, 6th Street over on the east side of town, 4th Street from Jeffers to Poplar, 2nd Street Jeffers to Silver, B Street from McDonald to Silver. We have a couple over on Stewart and Bear over on the residential side on the way west part of town. William, the entire stretch of William, which goes from Union, Union East is concrete, but from Union to Sunset. And we also have a stretch of Union that goes from William up to Cedarberry. And then some of the high traffic areas around Walmart, on the south side of Walmart on Leota, the north side of Walmart on Francis, and then Leota going from Jeffers to Willow. And then we have two sections down on the southern part of town, Eugene going from Highway 83 over to Willow behind Hobby Lobby. And then also Walker from where they repaired last time up to the MPPD Canal Bridge. And the two areas that we have shown in blue, those are seal coat, which would be repair work. That's Halligan and Walker Road. There's some maintenance repair that needs to occur. But then the seal coat, the purpose is to rejuvenate the oil and get a better wear surface. And the green shown was seal coat that we did last fall. And the green, those areas, you might have noticed what they did is they sprayed a rejuvenating oil down and then they put sand down and then took the sand back up about, I think it was that night or maybe the next day depending on schedule. So those areas were most of Buffalo, Willow, and Oak and Phillip around the hospital area. The last piece I'm going to cover is the 6-year plan, and I'd call it the 2 to 6 year plan. And 6 is just means long term. I don't know why they picked necessarily the word 6 or the number 6, other than it's just longer term. And the purpose is to identify projects going into the future that need to be addressed and to plan accordingly. In theory, some of them should move from the 6 and become more prioritized and eventually become the 1-year plan. It's the way that it should funnel through. There are some things that are on the longer horizon that it might be development driven, City North Platte growth driven, but it's looking out way out in the future. So I'll kind of cover through the 2 through 6 year portions as well, and probably start at kind of the top and just work our way down. At the top we have Sheridan. I was trying to get an idea of roughly, here's Buffalo, but so it's Sheridan and north of Rodeo Road. We also have 17th Street, that's a stretch of gravel. US Highway 30 overlay, we have that, that's a cooperative effort with the state. Long-term desire is to improve the Rodeo Road ditch along Rodeo Road, where it's the big irrigation ditch on the south side going by the county, and then it cuts over and goes through near the cemetery area, going through the golf course. Again, this is on the 2 through 6. 9th Street, we had that on the 1-year plan for design. We have that on the between the 2 and 6 year plan, which we're looking at towards next construction a year from now. Construction season, we've talked about getting 9th Street moved up into that category. We have some additional work shown on the front or on the downtown area. It's generically shown the downtown, but we've 2 years ago we finished the North Dewey from 4th to 6th, 5th area. But south of 4th Street, there's some area work that needs to be done along Dewey and 3rd Street. There's still some original brick over in that particular area that we have on the 2 to 6 year portion. We have South Dixie on the 2 year portion going from A Street south. Jeffers and Dewey, those are cooperative projects. The state's taking the lead and the city's participating financially with those. These 3 particular projects over on the east side of town, those are gravel streets that we just have on the map that we'd like to get those eventually switched over to concrete streets. Francis and Leota, this is around the hospital area, and Centennial Park, the concrete streets going on the south side of the hospital, north side of the hospital. We have those on the 2 to 6 year plan. South River Road with the county, that's a longer term. That's been overlaid in fairly good condition, but in the long term, that could be looked at being brought into the city at some particular time. That's probably in the longer horizon. And in those longer horizon, State Farm Road, Those both right now are asphalt sections that would be looked at being converted into a concrete urban section, similar to what we're looking at with Lakeview. And again, those are probably, they wouldn't put them in the 6-year horizon. Those would be a lot longer horizon, but it's kind of on the radar. They might be 10, 20-year type of thought process. We also have quite a few different other items that are listed up in here that in the past there was talk about a west bypass study. We've left that on there in the long term because that's been looked at in the past. We have some intersection replacements shown with X's along, and that'd be like Francis and Oak, B and Oak, 4th and Mills, 9th and Mills. And then we have creeping up in importance, bridge maintenance repair work that we're going to need to do on the viaducts going over the railroad for Willow, Poplar, Buffalo, and then Buffalo going over the South Platte River, and also Buffalo going over the interstate, those bridges that are in the city's responsibilities and repair needs. One item that is not on here that we've talked about is West Phillip is needing concrete repair work as well. And we've been talking about different ways that might be looked at. So as a whole, this is kind of the big picture. We went through the 1-year plan, which is what we're looking at, and then we brought up this second part, which was the maintenance, which has a lot of individual roads, can give you an idea of what areas are going to be getting milled, asphalt, and then seal coat. And then the 2 to 6 is the longer plan. And a lot of these things are dynamic, meaning developments show up that impact and might change what might be a priority, or there's times where the weather impacts some of the conditions of the roads. We've noticed some of the roads this year in certain areas are doing worse than we would have guessed, considering it hasn't really been a harsh winter and we haven't had much precipitation. So there's certain areas that are doing worse than others, and that's normal, that you just have to adjust with the dynamic conditions of what weather and also development brings. So I guess with that, I would open it up to questions if anybody has questions. And I guess Mayor usually has about 3 minutes is what he usually has, not because of wanting to limit anybody, but just to give everybody the opportunity to talk. And I'm glad everybody's here, and if everybody uses 3 minutes, we might be here an hour or two, so and that's fine. But, go ahead.
I saw here you got West F Street, from Bear to Dixie on a plan next year for new asphalt?
That's going to be this year.
This year for new asphalt?
Correct.
Oh, heavens. So we got a double whammy. Now we got Dixie. How are we gonna get Dixie down the road, because it needs some repairs right now?
Do you want to talk about the repair part, or do you, this particular portion of Dixie is more of a complicated, because of some of the past discussions, from my understanding, as far as how it's going to be paid, whether it's a district, a paving district, or how that's resolved. And I haven't heard an answer on that, but there's things.
The past administration, when they come out, we talked about a couple of years ago, right on the corner of F and Dixie, and what the city was gonna do, which they told me the old county road, hard surface, is city's responsibility. So, but those guys are gone, so.
And those are things that we'll have to look and talk more about. I know one thing, as far as changing the section, the right-of-way width in some areas is really narrow, so it kind of limits, as is.
When they opened up between Oriole and Phillip, I mean, our traffic has increased dramatically, and with the new development there at Phillip and Dixie, we have all those heavy trucks going down, so you're getting
Construction traffic.
Yeah, a lot more payment. When the guys come out, they do a good job of patching, but they said this is, it's so soft underneath that, but this year, you can tell when people don't live on Dixie, because they wanna go into somebody's yard. So, and their eyes are that big around, but there's plenty of room, but people kind of panic. So, but, yeah, just, if we can stay in the loop, and we appreciate the mayor and the city giving us plenty of warning for your meeting tonight, and we want to thank you for that.
Thanks for your comments, too, appreciate it. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I live out on Dixie Street, and I was just wondering, is there any kind of a provision that will reimburse us for the trees that we would lose if they widen Dixie Street?
If there's trees, technically trees that are in the right of way are technically on city property, that's one thing. They'd have to look at tree by tree type of basis, but usually if there's a tree, landscaping, they usually put them back. I mean, but they're not obviously the same size as what you started with.
No,
So-
we bought this place long before you were born. I just turned 90 last week, so I'm kind of in love with the trees. I've got 3 great big pine trees there. I realize that they'll have to go if they widen the street. And I just wondered if there was any provision to reimburse me for them.
Usually there isn't my experience isn't a mechanism to pay for those, but frequently there'll be something, a replacement, but it won't be, a 40-year-old tree or anything like that, and that would be, from your standpoint, it wouldn't work very well to replace a, however old your tree
Like
is.
maybe 70-year-old trees.
Exactly, it's not the same, but, and it could, from a cost perspective, that gets really difficult to address.
Another thing, I noticed that the street and my front yard has already been painted for, communications and stuff like that. Does that mean that they're gonna start on that pretty soon?
On which area, is it on Dixie? No, that wouldn't be related to this.
It was, I think, Aloe,
Okay, I don't know I don't think it's related to
there was
us.
some blue lines for water and things like that.
That's a locate, but that's not for our particular work, it's not quite yet. It's probably another month away, so shouldn't be us.
So on Eugene Street, are you guys gonna widen that, and then how much is it gonna cost?
You're talking on Eugene?
Yes.
Down here. This is on the longer term portion. Right now, part of this is, this is all in the city limits. Right now, this is just on the long term. There's a lot of details that have to be addressed because there's some similar issues with the right of way being very narrow along that corridor. And so as of right now on costs, it's not even on the design portion yet, so we wouldn't even have dollars assigned to it. There's a lot more steps that we need to even get to before that happens. So it doesn't really answer your question, but hopefully it answers it by not giving you I know you want to know how much and when, but it's just on the radar right now, is what that would mean. So that in the future, Eugene is going to need to be addressed, and there'll be probably a lot more meetings to try to figure that out, because that's going to be a complicated corridor to deal with.
Back to Dixie, when is the projected date to start that?
For Dixie itself, this is just in the 2 to 6 year range is what we're looking at. It's not going to be in the next 12 months
Okay.
at this point anyway. So
Okay, thank you.
With Dixie too, so I mean, you say the 2 to 6, is there ever times where it keeps getting pushed out even further? So that's,
I mean, that's the thing with the 6 is
it's still
it
just.
could be 2 to infinity. Maybe would be the better way of describing it, because example, the State Farm Road, those are probably a long ways down, but we just wanted to keep that on the radar if this develops. State Farm might be, so it just meaning some of these, they're more of a range that some of them are gonna be 2 to 3 years, some are gonna just in the longer term.
So right now, there are many, many potholes, and Dixie is already very narrow. I mean, like, is there a short-term plan to try to keep filling those, because it's getting pretty bad.
I have Lane Grosov come up, he's the Public Works.
That is a great question, because basically we're putting patches on top of patches right now, and it's not holding real well because of the shape of that. And that's one of the conversations we've had as far as, how much money do you keep putting in patches that are dissipating, or do you look at doing a complete rebuild of the road? And so that's part of the discussion. We'll continue to try and pothole as best we can, but unfortunately, pothole on top of pothole just makes it a washboard more than
You could lose a Volkswagen in some of them.
Yeah, but that, you know, that's one of the things we're trying to, as soon as the frost is out of the ground, we're gonna get hitting some of those better again, but
Understood.
we'll do as best we can on the maintenance of that.
One last question on Dixie if I can. So the potential, when we do this, is it pretty much gonna widen to like where the sidewalk is there? Or do I just look at the south end and say that's how wide it's gonna be on the north end as
The
well?
south end, I think, would give you a pretty good idea. That isn't a full 30, some of the discussion that gets into on the street width is, do you want parking on the street or not? Because if you have parking on the street, it needs to be wider. Let's say along Phillip, or, you know, many of those streets are 37 foot wide, then you can have parking on both sides. But, as you know, you go 37 foot, and then you put sidewalk and sidewalk, now you're at 41 feet, and some of the right-of-way is 40 feet, it's already wider than the right-of-way. You can do 30 foot with no parking. So, I mean, those are some of the things that could be looked at, is if it was narrower with no parking. But there's pros and cons with that too, because sometimes as a residents, you know, you want to have a Husker football party and park on the street. But if it's narrow, I mean, those are the pros and cons that have to go through the whole thought process of design. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Just one more with Dixie. I guess I'm curious why Dixie keeps getting pushed back in the 2 to 6 years, to where from Lakeview to Front with development, obviously, that got pushed through quickly, but that road's fine. You know, I mean, there's not the potholes like we're dealing with. So why, if you, I mean, you might not have an answer, why do we just keep getting pushed back? Because it is an issue, I mean, vehicle-wise, it's costing us on alignments and other aspects.
From my understanding from past administrations, it was because there was concern, a lot of people didn't want it wider, some did, and if we're gonna do a rebuild, it's probably gonna be wider, so I think there was concerns as far as what, there's about 50-50 from my understanding what the residents were before my time, is who wanted what. And so I think that's some of the reason it may have got pushed back. I know there's been some discussion internally as far as having some public hearings and stuff with the residents along Dixie to try and talk about a plan, a shorter range plan, but that's kind of in the discussion phase. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my understanding of some of the reason they got pushed back. Yes, sir.
I have walked Dixie a few times talking to people, and, you know, concern, I mean, they know something needs to be done, but if you look on the west side of Dixie, you got people that got, you know, 2, 3, 4 acres, and they got a lot of frontage, so the concern was, you know.
Cost.
Money.
Cost, yeah.
Sure.
I don't have a good answer how that would ever be broke down as far as this.
And we're supposed to have some public hearings on Dixie, but we've had, you know, Mr. Werbrell come out, and Jim Hawks, you know, we've talked, you know, every so often about Dixie. So they, I mean, they know the problems there, and now they're gone, and now you know the problems.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a plan for Dixie, I mean, or any, I guess, plan for going over what you might want done with Dixie?
We have some concepts of what Dixie could be, but I guess the part where I guess we're talking about is, you know, getting refined some of the details on, because when you get into right of way, that's, you have to, you know, people give up some of their property to make the right of way.
I understand that, but I know there's been a lot of talk here tonight over Dixie out of the whole city, so I'm just kinda curious if you guys had something to throw at us. And maybe-
As far as well, I guess
Well,
maybe.
which, you know, options, I mean, which side you wanna take, if you wanna do it where there's no parking, or parking on one side.
I don't think we have anything put together in that detail, at least I don't. I don't know if there's something in the file. Many of these things have a long history behind it, and I don't have, I guess, that part. That's something we can visit with the administration and the mayor and see if we wanna get that, at least the planning discussion part, we could try to get that done in this next, you know, year, and try to get that ironed out, try to get the best solution
That would
possible.
go over a lot quicker, or a lot better, is if you had an idea and kind of threw it to everybody. And you're gonna know who's gonna be for it and against it, and I know you're gonna have both either way.
I believe some of that had been done in the past, from my understanding. Now, to what degree and how far, I don't know, as far as if it was, you know, like you mentioned, door to door, if someone had sat down and done any discussion. But I know that has been, like you said, there's been quite a bit of talk, but I don't know how far it went and how detailed it got.
Just talk, we haven't had any sit-down discussions.
Is the final decision on that made, just the city decides, or does it come down to some sort of vote, or, and what's the process usually?
I'm just gonna chime in for a second, even though I don't mean to steal your thunder, he'll answer your question, but those of you that live along Dixie, I'm Brandon Keller, I'm the mayor of North Platte, in case you don't know me. If we hold a meeting sometime this summer, and we throw a couple things up on the screen as possibilities, would you guys be willing to come and offer your opinions?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you guys make that happen sometime this summer.
Definitely.
And then back to this lady's question. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
What was your question again?
Does it come down to, I mean, do we get to vote on it, or is it the city's decision overall?
Well, it'll be, I mean, ultimately it's the city's decision because it's a city street. Then there will be some pieces depending on how it's financed or how it's paid for. That, you know, if it's done as a district, then people will vote on a paving district. If it's done different way, then no, then the city will, I mean, the administration council makes a decision on if it's done through a bond or another method. So, I mean, that would be the fork in the road. So, I mean, if it's money that's gonna come out of your pocket, you'd vote on it. If it's, well, I guess, if it's a taxpayer, you're still voting, it's just through the council. But I mean, if it's via an assessment to your property, then each of the property owners would vote on it if it's a paving district. Does that make sense?
Yes.
How does that assessment work? Do you just go off the people that are along Dixie, or is it through the area of Dixie?
It's front footage. The state statute is either area or front footage of the property that receives the benefit is the way that's set up. And
Just curious, because I mean, with it being a through street, I mean, we're not the only ones that use it. Edmund Court, Timothy Court,
and
we got a lot of people over there that run right down our street just because it's.
Eisenhower
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
turns into a racetrack.
You can tell when the railroaders get off too.
So I mean, I understand that.
So I'm like,
With some of that, I mean, where some of us do have longer frontages and we're gonna get hit hard with it.
there's policies that the city has, it kind of gets in the weeds of the assessment, but usually the 12-foot lanes are assessed to the adjacent property, and any width wider, the city pays for. Intersections, the city pays for. So it's not quite as simple as I described. So the city does usually contribute a fair amount to it. It's not take the whole cost and divide it up. It's take the cost, the city pays this part, the city pays this part. The intersections are kind of a mess. I mean, if you look like it, because they're, especially if you get into the corner lot, they're like, well, who pays for that? So it's usually the intersection the city pays for. And same with water and sewer. If there's a crossing, the city pays for that portion, so.
So with the land, sorry, so do we, when we have to give that up, if you guys like widen the roads, do we get compensated for that, or do you guys just like take it and then we pay for the roads?
Well, it depends on which process it goes through. If it's through a district process, they're usually what's asked of people if they would first consider, you know, because if the city pays for it, you have to realize every taxpayer in the city's paying for it. And so usually the process is we ask people if they'd be willing to donate it. And there's been quite a few people that have donated a strip of property, you know, for the project. And if not, then we usually go through the assessor's office. They have the land value, and you can take, you know, if your lot's worth 20,000 and it's 20,000 square feet, it's $1 a square foot. So you can come up with a price that is, you know, the fair market value, if you want to say that. If it's 100 square feet, it's $100, you know, based on the price that you, the assessor's value of it. That makes sense.
I know this is a long range one, but on West Francis, did you say they were gonna pour new concrete north of the hospital?
Correct.
Okay, and that's the city?
Correct.
Okay,
It'd be replacing what's there.
okay.
so when you're talking about widening the streets and putting in sidewalks and stuff, are you having to put in like new culverts and stuff like that? I know the last time they did work out in front of our house on Eugene, the culverts were never put in right. flooding's done. I mean, it's just been a mess, and we didn't ever get anybody to come fix it.
When you do a complete street rebuild, if Eugene's converted from, say, a rural section, the asphalt section, to more of an urban street section, stormwater is part of it. So there will be a plan to drain everything through curb inlets, graded inlets. And so it won't be, in general, it probably won't be surface. I wouldn't say probably never, but in general, it wouldn't be. There'd be a pipe going probably to the Fremont Slough or connecting to Willow that goes to the river, something along those lines.
So that's, is that included in what we have to pay then?
Typically, not. It depends on, there's more variables than, usually it involves a trunk main. The trunk main does not get assessed to the project. Cross pipes for the street usually do, but that's usually like 30 feet. It's not very big. But usually the main drains for the system itself do not get assessed to the project.
Like, kind of going back to what the gentleman asked earlier, I'm kind of curious about too, you know, we had to pay for, when they paved from Eugene up north to Oak, when Oak went north, they put in, they widened streets, put in sidewalks on both sides and all that. And like the corner lot and me, I'm the second one over, we had to pay for that, but we don't ever use it. So why? Just why? Why don't the people that use it have to pay for it?
That, you know, what do you mean as far as the people that use it? Why
Yeah,
don't
I
they
mean,
have
the
to pay
people
for it?
that were going over like the Hackberry and Russian Olive, they used it several times a day. Like, I might use it once a month or something, even that. Yeah,
And
why?
that specific one, I might need to sit down and look at it with you, and some of the past history, but I would be happy to sit down and look at that exact one and try to explain the assessment process. That in general, like on water and sewer, they won't assess the 150 foot back. That's about a half a block. Corner lots and things like that, those get pretty expensive, and there's a balance that goes along with that, trying to be, you know, equitable to everybody. But I understand what you're saying. But when you're looking at the big picture, if the city's paying for part of the overwidth and intersections and things like that, the rest of the community is paying for part of the project, not the whole, but it'd be part of it.
Just find it interesting, I guess, that we're paying for it, and the people that use it all the time get to their property, don't pay anything. So I find that interesting.
So
And
when you do widen that, are we responsible to pay that?
For Eugene,
Yes.
that's gonna be a discussion at the time when we go through it of how that's going to be done. That's gonna be part with the council, and it's gonna be more of a political discussion of how that's gonna happen, so.
Do you have any clue when you're gonna start discussing that one?
I don't know. I'd have to ask the mayor and council where they would like to have that on the agenda. So I don't know. Sorry, I don't knows, but that's one.
I mean, most of the people out there are retired or
Yeah.
one income, I mean, how is that even
Yeah.
gonna?
How
Are they
many
gonna pay
with
for
COVID?
Mhm.
everything, losing their
Yeah.
jobs?
I mean, people have lost work, and I know the city goes, woo-hoo, we have federal money, we're gonna go ahead and forge ahead and do this stuff, but what about us? Do
Yeah.
we get government assistance to pay for all this stuff? I don't see it coming to help us to pay for it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's expensive and it's a challenge to deal with.
And it's not in my budget right now.
No, I understand that.
Mark, I'd just like to make a comment on your statement about, like, why should you be assessed because you don't use it?
Mhm.
Well, if you wanna use that argument, I
No.
get where you're coming
I'm
from,
just asking.
but you gotta think then, if we all say that, then everybody's gonna have to be assessed for every road that's built, to be fair. I mean, if you think it through.
Well, right, but.
I get
I
what you're
wouldn't care-
saying.
I wouldn't care if that neighborhood got assessed, but they didn't.
Okay.
I mean, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
in a way, but the people that use it, why don't they get to help pay for it? That's all I'm asking.
I know what you're asking.
booth, how's that?
Well, it's really expensive.
We have another question up here in the front, go ahead.
Yeah, I live on East B by the craft building, and thank you for, it's an overlay or whatever you call it, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm glad you're doing that, because it really needs it. That Cottonwood B intersection's bad, there's a lot of bad stretches down there. But anyway, I wanna get on just a little bit different topic, because some of the council members are here and you're here. Traffic control, you know, and there's gonna be development, it sounds like, out that way towards Bicentennial and maybe further out that way, and I'm all for the development, it's great, I love it. But what happens is, and I see it right now, there's like, B Street's just a straight shot, and so like, there's the UPS trucks, some of the Cisco semis, some of the commercial vehicles, I've even seen grain trucks on B Street. And they should, like, there's 4th Street and Phillip Street are kind of the arterial streets. And I know what they're doing, they like that B Street, cause it's a straight shot, man, you don't gotta stop. And at 6:30 at night, when UPS guy's going home, he ain't going 25, I can guarantee you that. And they're just flying down that B Street. So I just hope everybody keeps in mind that there's a little traffic control issue going on there on B Street. You know, it's not a bad problem now. It's probably gonna become a bigger problem as time goes by, but I just want everybody to know, as long as I'm here and you guys are here.
Just as information for you that ties into the B Street, because you asked, what's being done, just as, B Street from McDonald this way, it's concrete with a thin asphalt overlay on it, and believe it or not, it's probably approaching 25 years. It's done extremely well to make it that long. And over here is concrete, and we're gonna mill about 1.5 inches out. You know, the concrete's really rough over there. It's in good structural condition, but it's in terrible surface condition. It's really, really rough. Like you mentioned, B in Cottonwood, that's just a really rough, and going from there all the way on the north side of the Craft State Office Building. So our plan is to mill all of that roughness off and then put an asphalt inlay. And it is a concern with it being smoother, people might go faster, so, as you were referencing.
You know, and that's where they're going, like the UPS, you know where the UPS is, they're trying to get to their main office over there, and Cisco guys are trying to get out to the interstate or wherever they're going, and they like that B Street. So it's just a little bit of a problem there. They don't wanna use that Phillip and 4th Street. And I checked, I actually checked the ordinances, and that's to make sure if B Street's supposed to be like, classified as arterial street, and it's not, it's just a regular old
It's a
street.
collector, yeah.
Because I wanted to figure out a way to slow those guys down, but you know, it's just a small beef, I'm just telling you.
They go faster down Burlington. They come from being just, yeah, they
That's
just
what
rip
I
down
mean,
that.
there's no way to,
Boulevard.
there's no stopping from,
Yeah, there's not.
there's no stopping from
No.
it. And you know this, from Jeffers and all the way down to Bicentennial, that's just a straight shot. But that's enough, I don't wanna take any more time over that.
Thanks for your input and your question too. Donna,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna comment, I live on Bryan and Phillip Street, and the traffic is horrendous, and the speed is out of control.
Where's that?
On Bryan and East Phillip,
Oh, East.
and I travel B quite a bit too, and there is a ton of traffic, but that's because of that street, you know. I'd be all for lowering the speed limit.
Eric, did I see you raise your hand? Did you have a question or anything?
There's been some good discussion about how things are paid for. In general, is there a difference between how the city pays for arterial and collector streets versus local residential streets?
Once they're at city standard, no. Then it just becomes an example. Sometimes it's helpful for me to think of, you know, when they're started new. Like West Brentwood, the developer paid the entire cost of that. And the water, sewer, paving, and then they dedicate it to the city. They have to build it in accordance with city specifications. And so they bear all the cost of it and then give it to the city when they're completed. So if you look at it, each one of those lots were assessed, or the cost of those improvements were included in the sale price of that property. So that's the theory, that all existing with full city specified streets, they've reached that spot. Now, the city can reassess that, but that becomes a very, very big political issue, and Kearney has tried that, and it's not very popular if you get charged for street twenties.
So what I believe you said, once a city street has been built to city standards, once it's done and the city accepts it, then from then on, the city as a whole pays the maintenance.
Correct.
Okay.
And takes care of it, just like along by Walmart.
So the questions are on improvements.
Correct.
Okay. And such as Eugene, I'm Eric Seacrest, and Gary Pearson asked me to represent the chamber. And one of the concerns is Eugene, because it is not safe for many trucks. It's just dangerous. And something needs to be done in a fair way. And it's, I don't know if it's a collector or an arterial, but it is a major through street, not a local street, and therefore it would seem that the city ought to bear a big share of fixing that problem. It is wonderful to see so many people here. There's been times where this particular meeting wasn't very well attended, and that shows a lot of interest in roads. It's wonderful to see so many council representatives here. This chamber's number one concern would be for the city to do everything possible to get improvements on Newberry, from the interchange all the way up to Highway 30. The state has it in their plans. It probably will be a total state project, but the city can do some things to influence how fast they move. The interchange needs improvements right now, because trucks just crawl across that. And, also, you've done a project on Lakeview with, I believe, slightly wider sidewalk.
Correct.
How much wider was it?
Thanks. More, and I'll just kind of rewind all the way since you asked the question on it. On Lakeview, the bike trail that's on A Street, there's a wider 10-foot on the south side. And what we're going to do is have the wider I'm up here. We're gonna have the 10-foot on the east side go all the way up to Front Street. So, and then we're going to work on getting it connected down on Lakeview. So this would be another gap of.
And the normal sidewalk would be how much?
Usually 4 foot, this is gonna be 10 foot.
And who paid for the extra 6 feet?
The city's paying for that.
And how cost effective is it to get that economy of scale?
To do an extra 6
To do
feet,
the extra.
it's a lot.
So,
Sidewalk is expensive for what sidewalk is about the same price as a street because of the labor. If you look at, you're doing forms this far, the manual labor involved with putting 2 forms this far apart. So the cost per square foot is about the same on a sidewalk as if you do a city street, because if you use a paving machine, they're going full width. Seems a little strange, but you know, the cost per unit is similar.
but it's cost effective to do the
Yes,
extra,
absolutely.
and take care of a trail where it's appropriate.
Correct.
To get to, say, a school, etc.
To do it after the fact
Oh,
would be probably 3 times as much as
okay.
doing it. Because you have to take out the 4 foot and then put in the 10 foot, so it's a lot more, good question, it's a lot more cost effective to do it on the front end.
And then finally, there's gonna be a project on Jeffers in the next 2 years from next year and the following year. And obviously the business community as well as the residents hope you find good ways to keep access to destination places on Jeffers during that project. And don't put anybody out of business and don't keep the customers from getting to where they wanna get.
And I'll pass the buck because that's 100% a state project, and we've talked to them frequently, and they are required to provide access to all businesses. They can't shut off access to a business, so they're very well aware, I believe, but I don't think it hurts to keep reminding of the importance. And I know especially from Phillip down to Leota, that corridor there's a lot of traffic and a lot of in and out, but it's no less important than any of the other businesses from there going to the north. And So we've had discussions from the city and I guess reiterating our concerns just from importance. Because we had the First to Sixth Street portion that impacted businesses as well, so.
Thank you. Nice plan. And, one final thing, congratulations on, it's clear you stepped up your maintenance efforts from all that. And I think that's something that's preserving an asset and keeping it from being even more expensive down the road.
And I think that's a good segue to just give you an idea. I mean, unfortunately, everything's expensive, but the red that we're looking at right here is about $3 million. And this portion, now the scales aren't quite the same, so don't think that this red is the same as that. But this is about $1.5 million. And this is about $3 million. So there's a little bit when I was going through the presentation, is like, I look at all the streets and I look how much I'm not getting, how much we're not getting done. But we're still spending $4.5 million, which is a lot of money. And we are getting a lot of linear feet in some major traveled areas. And this is like an elephant. You just take one bite at a time to eat it. And that's what this is one more bite, hopefully. So. Well, with that, I'm going to close up here now. I'll stay up here to answer any questions. Feel free to come up and ask. Did you have one other
Just
one?
one quick one, I mean, I've never experienced this before, so if we do have to foot the cost, is there a payment plan, or are we we're just billed $15,000?
No, it's usually a 10-year
Okay.
plan, and a lot of times it's better to just get financing for yourself. Depends on interest rates and things like that, but there's a whole state statute that delineates the whole process with that. Okay, so, Brad?
Just a quick comment. I want to thank you guys for coming out. These are difficult decisions, and, getting feedback helps these guys make the right decisions. So appreciate you all. Last year, I think it was the council and 2 people, so this is awesome. Keep it up, seriously. Thanks, guys.
One other question?
Talking about that sidewalk being really expensive, say on Dixie, if a homeowner wanted to front and do the sidewalk himself, would that be something we could cut off the bill?
I think that those are, case by case, those are things that definitely could be looked at, absolutely.
I got one more real quick. So you say the 10-foot sidewalk from front to A is relatively the same price as a street. That stretch of sidewalk is longer than our Dixie road. So why not, money-wise, use that money to help compensate the people in Dixie instead of the sidewalk there? And just my thought process of using money differently, but just a thing to think about of the homeowners on Dixie.
Yeah, I guess just to kind of piggyback on that, I mean, when does a sidewalk become more critical than a road? I mean, if there's already at least a sidewalk, if there wasn't any at all, I would understand, yes, you need safety for the kids that are walking from that new development up there, but if it's just a matter of widening it, I guess, how does the city come up with that decision?
Well, in this particular case, it was the project's being done, and if you're putting the sidewalk already, the incremental costs to go 6 extra feet are a lot less than, starting from scratch. So
there's not an existing sidewalk, is what you're saying?
Correct. There's nothing on
Okay.
Lakeview right now. So. And the other part is part of the trail network, which is kind of a different, related but different discussion also. So. Yes.
You're coming east on Francis, going across Jeffers, you have that big hump, right? Is that gonna disappear?
Not with this, but with the state project.
Okay. And can you leave the speed up bump on Dixie, because I love to see those cars fly over. That was a good one, thank you.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up our time here. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to stay around if you want to come up and ask questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Do you live on the street then? Yeah, right I live just a couple houses down from that.
So you're gonna be right over.
Yeah. No, I.
You can do that.